Well, good evening, this is Hamlock Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and here we are finally, oh my god, here we are on the eve of Brexit actually happening, and by midnight of tomorrow night Britain will have separated from the EU and will be setting its own course in the world as a sovereign state. And I cannot believe, after the 3 years of wrangling and mangling and bickering and blocking, it's just been unbelievable. And of course, none of this would be possible without the incredible work of Boris Johnson, who pulled together the Conservative Party and had a massive majority. Actually, a second referendum on Brexit was held through that election, and the people of England spoke again and spoke up. Nigel Farage, who got the Brexit Party together and basically kept up the pressure on the European Union. And of course, I'm sure you've seen some of his amazing speeches in the EU in Brussels. And he basically kept these commissioners' feet to the fire and would not let up. And of course, all of the Brexiteers and the energy that they put into sustaining the momentum that was started initially in 2016 with the referendum. Without those people, without people believing that change was possible, that Britain could go back to being a sovereign state, none of this would happen. So I would encourage all of you to maintain hope, keep the faith that sovereignty can be taken back, and that we can learn to interact with each other in a peaceful fashion, that we can have a mutually agreed trade that is beneficial to all parties and doesn't destroy the environment at the same time. No, I think this is a great momentous time, and thank you to all of you who put in that effort. But yet in many ways, you know, it has served its own purpose, because, you know, this is part of the big globalist plan, is to have basically the new world order, the one world government. And the beginning, of course, was Europe, the unification of Europe, and we can see now that it just hasn't worked. And I'm going to do another video coming up shortly, but democracy is crumbling around the world, and the people's faith in democratic systems has absolutely failed. And you're seeing basically riots or protests or unrest just about in every corner of the world that you can see. And the EU, of course, is a perfect example of why that is happening. And it's kind of interesting. I was listening to CBC Radio this evening, and there was the newscast came on, and they were interviewing a commentator in England about Brexit. And you know, the Canadian journalists could not resist getting into whether people who voted for Brexit had a university degree or not, and whether that was a big issue. And you know, not only do I find that insulting, because I don't have a university degree and I am a Brexiteer, however, I don't think that that has anything to do with my decision-making ability. But you don't have to have a university degree to smell a rat. Okay, and it's kind of interesting because, as I said, there's rioting going on in just about every country in the world, or unrest in every country in the world, and we can plainly see that it is the people with degrees who have been in charge for the last 50 years or so, and it is them who have brought us to this precipice. It is them that have cocked everything up beyond absolute belief. It is them who have been tone deaf to the warnings of the public, who in small groups here and there, and protesters have been calling out for greater democracy, greater participation. They have failed to recognize that people want to be a part of the plan, whether you have a university degree or not. And you know, I personally would rather trust somebody who can fix something, can actually do something tangible and explain it to me, than someone who has 15 degrees in goodness knows what and can't explain anything to me. So in actual fact, in some ways, as I say, it has played out just perfectly, because the 3 years that it took to get Brexit to happen allowed everybody to see just exactly how this plan was going to play out in the long run. And that was, you have no voice at all, you do as you're told, and that's it, and we make all the decisions, and if you can't survive under those conditions, well, too bad, that's your problem. We are going to create a situation where people are pitting themselves against each other. We have so many diverse groups, and of course this is how this takeover has been done, is by using words in a different way. So we have all these diverse groups, and diversity you would think would be a good thing, that we many different ideas coming together, but no, what diversity has come to mean is division. All of these groups arguing and bickering with each other, we're getting nothing done. And as long as we're arguing with each other, we will get nothing done. It's a completely untenable situation, and that is what these people have brought to you. Inclusivity. What does inclusivity mean? It means inclusive, it means everybody. Everyone is included. And yet, the inclusivity that we see today, there are certain groups that are not included. And we can see that quite clearly. And there are groups within groups that are not included. It's actually great, Dave Chappelle, his latest comedy special on Netflix, and he talks about the LGBTQ movement, and he says those letters, they may all be standing next to each other, but they don't get along with each other. They do not get along with each other. And so it is this divisiveness, this is lack of inclusivity. How can you be inclusive when you're dividing people up? Okay, so this is the doublespeak that they have brought us, and this is why democracy is collapsing, is because democracy no longer means what we the people thought democracy should mean, which was fairness, a level playing field, honesty. The government will be fighting corruption, not part of the corruption, not allowing corruption. You know, the government has become a revolving door with the corporate world. And so here we are, you know, this is the weird kind of situation that we find ourselves in, some kind of strange blend of fascism and Marxism. And of course it all includes shutting down free speech, shutting down the voice of people who dissent against us, who question. And this comes back to the whole idea of shaming you if you don't have a university degree, and somehow implying that your opinion is not of value, that you are not still an intelligent person just because you didn't choose to go to university, and the only people at university are the only intelligent people in this world. And that is so arrogant, my friends, and again, it is another indication of what a wrong direction the EU is going in, and that globalism is going in. Now, Britain, having secured Brexit and leaving tomorrow evening, I think is the crack that we were waiting for in the globalist network. This will have repercussions. It's going to take time to play out, because history is a long, long process. It's been going on for a long time, in fact, since the dawn of time. So there you go, and things do take a long time, and it's not until you look back, and that's what I'm finding I'm enjoying about being at the age of 66, is that I can look back and realize, wow, it did take a long time, 50 years, 1972 to the present time, to unfold this globalist strategy in all its glory, and for everyone to get a good whiff of what it smells like. Okay, so yes, it is going to take a little time for this to unfold, but the longer the EU struggles to maintain its status, the harder it's going to be for the EU to hold what I call the sweet spot. You know, all of these systems that we have, to function properly, they need a sweet spot. They need all the conditions. They need the corporations functioning. They need the economy functioning. They need people working and not rebelling, to be cooperative, and so on and so forth. And it's very hard to hold all of those conditions in place at the same time. And of course, as time drags on, as the 3 years over Brexit dragged on, we saw how the EU behaves. Look at the treaties that were ignored after a vote. The Lisbon Treaty, the Madrid Treaty. These were voted on by the public and voted against, and they had to have a second referendum. They wanted Brexit to be a second referendum. Well, why do you need that if you believe in the voice of the people? Why do you need to have a second referendum? You asked the question once and you got the answer. But that was the wrong answer. Ha! Fancy that. Well, now that we can see that that's how they play the game, I'm asking you, is that how you want to play the game? Is that who you want to play with? People who change the rules of the game when they start losing? Because they want you to be on the back foot, not them. And this is how, through control. And I will admit, that's one thing that, that Polly was right about. They have some incredible control over the institutions that govern the way society functions. But as far as I can see, they're all in distress. There is not one of them that is coping well with the 21st century. And I believe that is because centralization has had its day, and we are now looking at a decentralized world. And a decentralized world suits the common working people, because we're the ones who network. We are the ones who know how to get along together, to exchange, to trade and to barter and so on and so forth. And when all of these bizarre, out-of-date, antiquated governing mechanisms finally give up the ghost, I think you find that the world will get on quite well with each other. I mean, I find it amazing. I don't know how many other people would agree with me. I'm sure that you would. But, when I go about my daily life, the thought of war and warring with another country, another group of people, is the furthest thing from the minds of the public. There's not one of us wants to go to war, wants to send our children to war. And I know that when you see, these heartbreaking films of Palestinians and Israelis and so on and so forth, and bombs going off in a marketplace, these are ordinary people like you and I. Do you really think that those people want to see a situation like that unfolding? Of course not. So who starts the wars? Who are the people in charge? Who are the people forming the armies? Who are the people spending billions and billions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, in fact, on armaments, and then spreading the old armaments, the out-of-date armaments, around the world to, I don't know whether we can call them third world countries, but underdeveloped countries, whatever you want to say, okay, thus perpetuating the cycle. Well, that's not us. We end up getting roped into it because it's usually under some kind of duress, or there's some kind of big carrot being dangled for your kids to want to sign up and go over and get a foot blown off. I mean, for goodness gracious. So who starts these wars? So I think, really, that most people today would get along. We would find some way to trade backwards and forwards with each other. And I'm actually quite optimistic. And the fact that Brexit has happened is absolutely incredible. And so I am expecting a very positive outcome, and that the Remainers will be pleasantly surprised that it is not going to be a horrible shock to the system and that they've lost all control. I think they're going to find that they have regained control over their systems and over their country and over their sovereignty. And they may have lost 17 trading partners, which I don't think they will, but they have gained, I think it's 132 other countries who are not in the EU. So I think the odds are that Britain is going to be successful. There are some good brains in Britain. There is a lot of very well-educated people, business people, manufacturers. Britain used to be a leading manufacturer, and they've turned themselves over to high-tech in a very successful fashion. And so I don't think they will have any problem at all finding markets for their goods and finding sellers for the things that they themselves want to purchase. And I think that is what the EU is absolutely scared to death of, is that Britain will be a success and that the people will be happier, and that the people who have emigrated to Britain will be allowed to integrate more fully without continually loading down. It takes time to assimilate. It really does. I've been in Canada 40 years, and when I look back on my journey through assimilation into the Canadian culture, it took a long time. There were many little idiosyncrasies that I brought over from England with me, and that didn't quite jive with Canadian culture. And so yes, it takes time to assimilate to a new culture, to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And so when you overload the system, you just have a collision, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So I am very positive, and I would like to have a toast to England, to Britain, a sovereign country, away from the bullying EU, and may the EU break up into its former states and have what was originally intended, I believe, which was a common market where you could trade backwards and forwards, but that you weren't held to these outrageous regulations of every single little thing. Things were working quite well before the EU came about, and I think they will work quite well afterwards. So goodbye Michael Bernier, goodbye all of the EU executive. Have a nice day. Cheers. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below, and in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Take care. Bye.